Welcome Foreign Minister Qureshi to the Woodrow Wilson School. I will be introducing Ambassador Finn, who will in turn introduce the minister. But let me just say a few things. First, in the past few weeks, we as Americans have sent our deep condolences to the Pakistani people after the bombing of the Marriott in Islamabad. The shock of it, the scale of it, it was something that resonated very strongly with many Americans, and we send the Pakistani people our condolences. Second, as I was thinking about the pleasure of being able to hear Minister Qureshi tonight, it occurred to me that in my lifetime there have been two lenses through which many people in this country have thought about Pakistan. The first, some of you in the audience will be too young to remember this, but during the Cold War, very often, you never said Pakistan without saying India in the same breath. India, Pakistan, the conflicts between India, Pakistan, the desire to avoid those conflicts, that was the lens through which many, even very sophisticated Americans thought about Pakistan. More recently, the lens through which much of our government and many Americans have seen Pakistan has been entirely through the lens of the war on terror, through the conflict in Afghanistan, through more generally the struggle within Pakistan itself. It seems to me that with a new government in Pakistan and soon a new government in the United States, regardless of whichever party, we are entering a third stage, a stage in which the lens that we look at is the lens that simply takes Pakistan as it is, as a complex country, as an ally, as a country that shares many interests with us, as a young democracy, a renewed democracy, but also a country, of course, that has a wide range of interests. There will be times when we obviously will be working very closely together, and there will be times when, for both our reasons, we will have to have frank discussions. So it gives me particular pleasure to be able to have Foreign Minister Qureshi here tonight at really, as I said, the outset of a new phase in the American-Pakistani relationship. Now, we have our own expert here in the Woodrow Wilson School. Ambassador Robert Finn has been with us for the last few years as a lecturer in the Near Eastern Studies Department and a senior research associate at the Woodrow Wilson School at the Liechtenstein Institute for Self-Determination. Ambassador Finn was, as many of you know, ambassador to Afghanistan from March 2002 until August 2003. Right after the fall of the Taliban. Before serving as ambassador to Afghanistan, he served as ambassador to Tajikistan from 1998 to 2001, and prior to that, he served in Turkey, in Zagreb, and in Lahore. So he has served as a diplomat in Pakistan. I have to just add that he is the consummate scholar diplomat. He has a PhD from Princeton in Near Eastern Studies. He has published volumes of poetry as well as commentary on diplomacy. So I invite him to the stage as an example of what we think is the best part of both the Woodrow Wilson School and Princeton as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dean's daughter. You're much too kind. When I was a student here at Princeton 30 years ago, the motto of Princeton was Princeton in the nation's service. And then when I came back, I discovered that it changed, and now Princeton is in the service of all nations. And I assume that when I come back in my next incarnation, and that will be as a squirrel on the Princeton campus, that the motto will be Princeton in the service of all worlds. And I look forward to that. Yes, I've had a very nice career, and 20 years ago I was privileged to serve in the beautiful city of Lahore in Pakistan, which is where I first met the minister. At that time he was a young, brilliant politician with a wonderful career in front of him. 20 years later, as you can see, I'm white-haired, what's left, but he is still a young, brilliant politician with a career in front of him. We're very happy to welcome him to Lahore. In 1985, he was elected to the Punjab Provincial Assembly. He was one of the very few people from the Pakistan People's Party who was able to make it through the elections that year. And since then, he has been extremely active in politics. He was in the Punjab Assembly. Pakistan has a federal government like ours. And so he was in the Provincial Assembly from 1885 until 1993. 3 elected terms, and then he was elected 3 more times to the National Assembly from 93 to 96, and then with a bit of a gap starting again in 2002 to 2008. While in the federal government, he was Minister of State for Parliamentary Affairs and also Parliamentary Secretary for Food and Agriculture. And before that, while in the Punjab government, he was Minister for Planning and Development and also Minister for Finance. In 2006, he served as spokesman for Benazir Bhutto, and he became, in the same year, the head of the Pakistan People's Party in the Punjab. He comes from a very, very long, and this is by Pakistani terms, long family, hundreds of years of service to the country. But he is very much a part of the new Pakistan, a Pakistan that is changing, that is believing in democracy and bringing government back to its people where it belongs. So we're very happy that he is here. We're very happy that he is in his position, but it would be foolish to think that it's not an extremely difficult task. Pakistan is at a number of crossroads at the same time, internally, externally, financially, politically, and militarily. So we're happy that you have the job, but we're very interested in hearing what you think about it. Thank you.
Madam Dean, Ambassador Finn, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, it's a pleasure to come to Princeton, one of the finest seats of learning in the world, and address this gathering. Princeton is among the crucibles in which great American minds and personalities have been forged to lead and guide the United States on its path to greatness and world leadership. There is an ever-growing array of U.S. presidents, vice presidents, senators, congressmen, Nobel laureates, CEOs of U.S. companies, jurists and judges that have benefited from Princeton's unique culture of bringing out the best in anyone fortunate enough to come here. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan has undergone a transition from an authoritarian government to a democratic dispensation since the general elections of February 2008. You are aware of the series of debacles that hit Pakistan in the run-up to the elections. President Musharraf, about whose legitimacy the public had serious questions, declared emergency on 3rd November 2007 to worldwide condemnation. Half the judiciary was sacked. In December 2007, prior to vacating the office of the Army Chief, he enacted a series of debilitating amendments to the Constitution, granting himself immunity from his own unconstitutional measures. These were calamities indeed for a country reeling under 8 years of mismanagement and one-man rule. However, we could never have imagined the catastrophe that befell us on 27th December 2007 when the twice-elected Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, was assassinated in broad daylight. She was the icon of Pakistan's quest for democracy and the rule of law. Her martyrdom was a rude shock to the entire country. We have still not recovered from it. The February elections were held under electoral machinery whose impartiality was open to question. However, so great was the desire of the people of Pakistan for democracy that despite these handicaps, their overwhelming verdict against the old order could not be masked by manipulation. Two things were immediately clear. First, the people rejected the party President Musharraf had created to help remain in power. Second, they unequivocally rejected the religious parties. We are at present engaged in undoing the damage done to our society and polity in the 9 years of dictatorship. President Musharraf's government prided itself for its management. However, in the year leading to the elections, it was so obsessed with thwarting the will of the people that it went into management hibernation. The international economic climate was steadily deteriorating all this time. There was a worldwide surge in food prices, particularly staples like wheat. The price of oil began a steady and certain climb upwards. Nothing was done to deal with these serious challenges. The government did not anticipate the severest energy shortage in Pakistan's history. It failed to make the connection that economic growth needed a commensurate investment in energy. It also did nothing to correct a severely skewed macroeconomic picture. The elections were just the first step in an extensive and arduous process of rebuilding democracy and democratic institutions in Pakistan. The military regime had mutilated almost every institution of the key state. The constitution had suffered more than 60 amendments. There was an issue of the judges. Most of the leadership had either been in exile or in prison. For instance, President Zardari was in prison for a decade before being sent into exile. The present Prime Minister was in prison for 6 years. The leader of the main opposition party, the Muslim League, was initially in prison and then sent into exile. We have therefore had to learn lost lessons. The institutions of the state have also had to relearn their functions and to work within established parameters. The primacy of the political leadership in setting national priorities has to be re-established. The notions of personal and institutional accountability have to be reintroduced. These are not easy tasks. However, such is the enormity and number of challenges Pakistan faces that these are among our easier tasks. We have to undo the damage done to the Constitution. These are immediate challenges that we must overcome within the space of months, or at the most a year or so. Only then we can afford to take a look at various developmental issues we face: provision of meaningful education, provision of healthcare, dealing with dilapidated infrastructure, and bringing Pakistan into the international economic mainstream. Ladies and gentlemen, so far I have not touched upon the single biggest challenge we face as a nation. I'm of course referring to terrorism. The struggle against terrorism is the defining struggle of our times. When terrorists hit the Twin Towers in New York 7 years ago, it was not an attack on the US alone. It was an attack against all civilized societies. Terrorism poses a threat to all of us. It demands a response from all of us. Unfortunately, through a confluence of historical and geographical factors, Pakistan finds itself the frontline state in the war against terrorism. It would be helpful if we can understand the genesis of the genie we are grappling with. We inherited terrorism issue in the wake of the war against Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Pakistan and the US were partners in the endeavor that sowed the seeds of the eventual unraveling of the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, while we won the war, we lost the peace. The spectacle of the Berlin Wall being breached and Soviet satellites gaining freedom in Europe claimed US attention, and just when Afghanistan and Pakistan needed US and international support the most, it found itself abandoned. The coming and rise of the Taliban was a natural corollary to developments in Afghanistan following the Soviet withdrawal and the US turning away. The Taliban's medievalism further alienated the international community. The isolated regime became a haven for the world's former jihadi warriors. Osama bin Laden, forced out of Sudan, found welcome there. And it was from there that the 9/11 attack was mounted. As the immediate next-door neighbor, Pakistan was not totally insulated from what was going on in Afghanistan. Other than Afghanistan itself, no other country has paid a higher price for the Soviet invasion and the war against that invasion than Pakistan. The proliferation of weapons and drugs such as heroin in Pakistani society is a direct consequence of that war. More than 3 million Afghan refugees poured into Pakistan. Rather than confining them in camps, we allowed them to work. A whole generation of Afghan was born and reached adulthood in Pakistan without setting foot in their own country. The burden they imposed on our economy and society is incalculable. Even now, there are nearly 3 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan. Almost all Afghan leaders, including President Karzai, have at one time or another availed Pakistan's refuge and hospitality during the Soviet occupation of their country. It did not help that the Pakistan-Afghan border is one of the most difficult terrains to police. There is a historic free movement of people across this border, as the people on both sides of it are ethnically the same. Following the US attacks on the Taliban regime, the defeated remnants of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda crossed the porous Pak-Afghan border and entered our tribal areas, what the world now knows as FATA. There was no terrorist activity in these areas prior to October 2001. The FATA had enjoyed autonomy in running their affairs since British times. They had their own laws and customs, and the central government in Islamabad dealt them through a political agent. The system had worked relatively well until the shock of 9/11. Nevertheless, in the immediate aftermath of the US attack on the Taliban, we were able to apprehend or kill hundreds of Al-Qaeda and Taliban cadres. Some of the most prominent terrorists in US custody, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, was arrested by Pakistani authorities. The government of Pakistan, believing that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda elements continued to remain in the FATA, launched a full-scale army operation in those areas in 2004. This was the first time in nearly a century that regular troops had entered those areas. While the operation was a success on many counts, it alienated the traditionally independent-minded tribal population. The Taliban and the Al-Qaeda fanned this alienation while causing the more peaceful elements in the tribal society. When their situation grew desperate, they resorted to indiscriminate killing of Pakistani civilians and armed personnel in the rest of Pakistan. This is where we stand today. We are at war in FATA against the extremists. We have lost more than 1,200 soldiers in this war. This includes 1 3-star, 1 2-star, and a number of 1-star generals. Other than the US casualties in Iraq, this is the largest number of casualties sustained by any country fighting terrorism. Additionally, thousands of civilians have been killed in suicide bombings and targeted killings. Pakistan is a victim of terrorism. I must therefore confess to a degree of bewilderment when Pakistan is seen more as a problem in some US circles than as a partner in this defining struggle of our times. There is talk of terrorist safe havens in our border areas, be it Afghanistan and Pakistan. I agree there are Taliban and Al-Qaeda elements in those areas. The rising death toll bears the clearest testimony to their presence. However, they are there despite our best efforts to dislodge them. What more can I say to underline our commitment to reclaim our land and our way of life from the terrorists that we have not even hesitated from using air power against them? However, in Fatah, we are not only fighting the terrorists, we are fighting the terrain as well. Force is certainly the most important ingredient in fighting any insurgency in the short term. However, force alone will never be sufficient. The terrorism we see in Fatah is a toxic brew of many elements: Taliban and Al-Qaeda presence, ideology, ignorance, lack of economic, social, and political opportunities, governmental neglect, marginalization, and an insular way of life. The strategy to combat it must be equally comprehensive. The objective is to win the hearts and minds of the populace so that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda find it difficult to hide in the population. Single-minded reliance on force will, however, result in further alienation of the populace. Admiral Mullen, U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, told Congress a few weeks back, and I quote, "It is my professional opinion that no amount of troops in no amount of time can ever achieve all the objectives we seek in Afghanistan. And frankly, we are running out of time," unquote. Force must be complemented by political, economic, and social engagement. We must not undertake any action that hardens the resolve of those already committed to violence or to sway the hostile neutrals to join them. I'm afraid that a relatively recent element in this already difficult war threatens to undo what we have already achieved. I'm referring to US attacks in Pakistani territory. I have read a US legislator's comments as to why Pakistan opposes US incursions, when in reality US troops are going into Pakistan in hot pursuit to fight the elements that threaten Pakistan. This is certainly one way of looking at this matter. However, the Pakistani public rightly sees such attacks as a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. It hurts us even more when the transgressor is our friend and ally, the US. If there are actions to be taken, those actions will be taken by Pakistan. I can understand the US frustration. Things are going badly in Afghanistan. Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, in an article published in the recent Foreign Affairs magazine, sums up the difficulties confronting the US in Afghanistan in these words: "Success will require new policies with regard to 4 major problem areas: the tribal areas in Pakistan, the drug lords who dominate the Afghan society, and the national police, and the incompetence and corruption of the Afghan government." Admittedly, the tribal areas are a factor in the difficult situation in Afghanistan. However, we need to also devote the same kind of attention to intra-Afghanistan factors. A large segment of Pakistani public, therefore, believes Pakistan is being made the scapegoat for ISAF and Afghanistan government's failings. We are doing our share in stabilizing the situation in Afghanistan. Our brigade-level operations in Bajor attest to our commitment. However, we must be honest to ourselves that the majority of Afghanistan's problems originate in and must be treated in Afghanistan. The solution lies in closer coordination among 3 principal parties: the US, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Each partner must also shed preconceived ideas and notions about the other's actions and motivations. The approach should be to address the problems rather than scoring media points. The capacity of both Pakistani and Afghan forces to fight the insurgents must be upgraded, augmented. On the Pakistani side, I can say that while we are quite effective during the day, we lose the initiative at night on account of limited night fighting capability. We need the means to gather real-time intelligence and to mount a real-time precision response in which there is minimal collateral damage. The US can help us in this area. There should be a matching response on the Afghanistan side to the border control measures we have instituted. We have some 1,100 posts along the border. There are about 100 or so on the Afghanistan side. These posts and measures should act as a double net. Those that manage to evade one should be ensnared in the other. We must also understand that progress will be incremental. It is easy to lose patience in such a conflict. Disagreements can erupt between allies. However, we must not forget that Pakistan and the United States are a team in this war. Neither can win this war easily without the other. Ladies and gentlemen, however, how is a democratic Pakistan better than an autocratic one in the fight against terrorism? I know there is no such thing as a panacea. However, I believe that democracy is the closest thing to a panacea mankind has invented or discovered. There are few people more qualified to make this statement than us Pakistanis. In the course of 60 years of our existence as an independent nation, we have suffered 3 major interruptions of the democratic process. The total time spent under authoritarian rule is more than our existence as a democracy. Each turn of the screw towards authoritarianism left us institutionally weaker and our polity more brittle. The last 9 years under General Musharraf were no different. Authoritarianism is an attractive shortcut. Democracy is the actual road where you have to make room for others and obey all signals. Yet, in the final analysis, it is the seemingly chaotic road of democracy that takes you to your destination. A democratic system has a natural pressure release valve. All issues are hammered out in Parliament. Opinions are expressed, consensus evolved, and where consensus proves elusive, compromises made. This process automatically takes the edge off the most extreme positions. There is an open airing of views, complaints, and grievances. The remedies to these are also openly discussed. The government's priorities are set by the representatives of the people. The representatives are answerable to their constituents. However, interaction with the constituents is a two-way street. The representatives can also educate their constituents about what is possible and what is not, and why this is so. Our democratic system is structurally more responsive to the real needs of the people. And neglect of the real needs of the people is what is behind the difficulties we face in Fatah. A democracy is inherently better suited to deal with the complex challenges that confront nations. Democracies are better at retaining and discharging the people's trust. If this were not the case, then the world would be full of autocracies instead of democracies. In the final analysis, it is only a democratic dispensation which can evolve the kind of national consensus needed to deal with a threat as existential as terrorism. Democracy is the only cure of the difficulties Pakistan faces. Our first effort is to ensure the primacy of the Parliament. All policies and decisions must flow from the people's representatives. We have made headway here. We forced the resignation of President Musharraf through parliamentary means. There are now smoothly running democratic governments at the center and in the 4 provinces. There is a newfound cordiality in relations between the Treasury and the opposition benches. The institutions of the state are becoming used to the civilian leadership setting the nation's priorities. In parallel to fighting the terrorists, we must turn the flagging economy around. A strong economy is the key to winning the war against terrorism in the long term. FATA is an area of special focus. We must generate employment there to give the youth of the area an alternative to Al-Qaeda playbook. The ignorance that breeds extremism must be combated through schools imparting modern education. The people of FATA must have a stake in Pakistan's stability and prosperity. A person with steady employment and prospects of a better future for himself and his children is less likely to turn to violence and terrorism. The basic premise is that Al-Qaeda and Taliban must not be able to find more recruits. It is a long road. The journey is arduous. However, it is a journey we must undertake if we are to become the country our founding father, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, wanted us to become, a modern Muslim nation at peace within and at peace without. Thank you.
The minister has agreed to take some questions, so raise your hand and I will call on you. There.
Excellent question, and I want to share with you that this new government realizes this inadequacy. And what we have done when we came into office, we changed our strategy. We thought and we learned from the lessons of the last 7 years, and now we have developed our multi-pronged strategy to fight this war against extremism and terrorism. And the strategy is we will engage politically with the moderates, those who are willing to give up arms and are willing to accept the writ of the government. We will concentrate on the socio-economic development of the tribal belt and FATA to win the hearts and minds of people. And yes, where required and whenever required, we will also use calibrated force. This is the new strategy that we have adopted. There were people who questioned this strategy, but now I believe at Bucharest, even the NATO allies have rethought and have agreed to a more comprehensive strategy. The government has also decided to undertake a media campaign to tell the people of Pakistan why fighting and winning this war is important for us, not just for US or the West, how it is affecting our economy, how innocent people in Pakistan are losing their lives, and how an interpretation of Islam is being thrust upon us, which we do not subscribe to. Absolutely. That is why one of the primary objectives of our foreign policy is to build bridges and to build good relations with our immediate neighbors, India on one side and Afghanistan on the other side, so that we can concentrate on the social sectors, education and health, and the physical infrastructure that is required for economic growth of Pakistan. That is why we are rethinking our strategy. We are allocating more resources to FATA. we have now we are trying to improve the management in the federally administrated areas. And we're also talking to our friends in the US in pushing through the legislation in which the reconstruction opportunity zones will come about in FATA, which will give access to goods being produced there into the US markets, so that there is an economic alternative available to people, and so that people, their standards of living go up. Bulk of the people living in FATA and the tribal area are people living beneath the poverty line, and that is easy. They are easy praise for the terrorists to recruit as suicide bombers.
Yeah. Yes, you.
Since you acknowledge that we have, thank you for being here on the comment since you acknowledge that both the U.S. and Pakistan are a common enemy in the Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces that are in the Baka area, and since you acknowledge that exploiting that scene to safeguard itself, do you support production of military operations between the U.S. and Pakistan forces?
You see, we feel that both sides of the border, the Pak-Afghan border, have to be managed. The US forces and ISAF forces are present in Afghanistan. We feel a lot of problems that we are seeing today are originating in Afghanistan. They should concentrate in Afghanistan. Pakistani troops and Pakistani forces are capable of handling the situation on this side of the border. So we can complement our activities without trespassing on Pakistan's sovereignty.
Thank you for being here tonight. My question digresses a bit from this topic, but it still concerns your visit to the United States. In November 2007, I was in the harbor in Makhdoom when we were assassinated, and I felt the emotional turmoil the country went through. And a few days ago, when President Asif Ghani came in front of the General Assembly and waved a picture of his late wife, may God bless her, in front of the General Assembly, I really felt the sympathy towards him when he said that I am a victim of terrorism. I, being the president of this country, is a victim of terrorism. But only a few hours later, that respect, that bond of trust was shattered when we saw those reports of President Ghani. I'm sorry to say this, but with him on, like Vice President, Presidential candidate Sarah Clinton saying that I might have you if he insists. How can the people of the country still continue to trust him? These kind of press statements are going through in the media. How are we supposed to trust him? How is the world, how is the United Nations supposed to trust our president when these kind of reports are going out?
I was present in that meeting. I think the news reports that you've seen are exaggerated. What exactly happened is this. Governor Sarah Palin walked into the room, and President Zardari greeted her, welcomed her, and just made a very innocent compliment that, you know, you look gorgeous and you look better in life than on television. And that's it. And then they sat. The news reporter said, can you stand up again for another photograph, and could you shake hands again? And he said, they're forcing me to shake hands with you again. So, madam, could you stand up? And the next, they might force me to hug you. It was a light comment. It wasn't said in the way that it has been projected. I think the media has gone over the board over it.
Going back to the discussion we were having before, you also mentioned this sort of tension that we have back home between the army and the parliament. Right? Army and the parliament, like the diplomatic forces in Pakistan and the Pakistan's army. You mentioned that they've been in control more than half of our history. So my question is that these days you're getting more and more pressure from the U.S. that you need to speed up the procedure in the border areas with Afghanistan. How much control do you think the parliament or the prime minister or the president has on the army? How much control is there on the ground? I mean, can you actually dictate the Pakistan army?
Well, in my speech, I mentioned our history. And our history shows that there have been three interruptions in the democratic process. I think we have learned the army as an institution and we as citizens that this is the only way forward. Dictatorships, military governments are no longer acceptable. They are not in vogue anymore and they will not be accepted. And if we become a military government or if we have a dictatorship, we will isolate ourselves. There is a growing maturity in Pakistan, and I feel that the democratic forces are also maturing. For example, the hostility you saw between the major parties in the past is now taking a different turn. We are learning to coexist. We are learning to give each other space. And when we develop this mutual respect, the political institutions start respecting each other. And when we can rebuild our civilian institutions that have weakened over the last 9-10 years, then I think the army will follow the constitution. And we have to educate the people. And we have to carry the people through our leadership. And I think today, the people of Pakistan, with a more independent print and electronic media, with growing independence of the judiciary. Mind you, number of interventions or extra constitutional interventions that did take place in Pakistan was because of a subservient judiciary. They sort of gave the stamp of approval to the doctrine of necessity. Now that is changing with an independent judiciary, with an independent media, with civil society becoming more vociferous. I think we are turning a new leaf, and we are going to add a new chapter to our political history.
Professor Dansbeck.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for a very comprehensive, honest, and actually hopeful speech. And let me press you a bit on your portfolio as foreign minister. You have not really gone into the relationship between Pakistan and India. And for anybody of us who has been dealing with the region around Pakistan, obviously you have Afghanistan to your west, you have India to your east, but you also have Iran to your west. So my question is, how would you evaluate as Pakistan's foreign minister the impending nuclear deal between India and the United States, on the one hand. And on the other hand, as we all know, swelling Iran crisis with the United States also about the nuclear issue, and Pakistan has been many times touched by this. And should we expect that if the nuclear relations between India and the United States would intensify, as there has been just last week, a new agreement between France and India, that perhaps the relationship on the nuclear level between Pakistan and China will intensify as well?
So 3 questions at least.
And loaded questions. I'll start with India and Pakistan. This government is very clear. We want to have friendly, cordial relations with India. We feel we've engaged in hostility for too long, and South Asia has suffered. There's rising poverty, there's illiteracy, there's hunger, and we have to reprioritize our resources for alleviation of poverty and other priorities. And in order to do so, we've got to normalize and have friendly relations with India. We have begun to do so. As I took over, we reviewed the 4th round of our composite dialogue, and we've initiated the 5th round of our dialogue. I've been to Delhi. Foreign Minister Mukherjee has been to Islamabad. I met with him here on the sidelines in New York. The President of Pakistan met with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in New York. I can assure you that the engagement that we've had has been very constructive, and both sides have expressed a willingness to resolve our outstanding disputes bilaterally and peacefully through a negotiated settlement. We feel that a number of initiatives can be taken to improve the climate. And I went with a very realistic agenda to Delhi when I was there. And I said, I've come with a situation, I've come with a proposal which is a win-win situation. I've come with 4 initiatives that can be undertaken that will improve the atmospherics and the climate in South Asia. 1, in my view, the Sir Creek issue between India and Pakistan is solvable, it's doable. All it requires is the political will. We have the political will to go ahead. The other issue is the Siachen issue. And I suggested that this issue is causing you and us immensely in financial and human terms. On top of that, there is an environmental issue added to this. This again is an issue that we came very close to resolving when Benazir Bhutto was Prime Minister and Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister of India. We can do it. It's doable. Thirdly, I said we have an opportunity of enhancing trade between our 2 countries, and that will also improve the climate in South Asia. And fourthly, we have to improve the people-to-people contact by liberalizing the visa regime. These 4 initiatives, in my view, can change the atmosphere and the climate there and bring normalcy to our relations. The second part of your question is the India-US nuclear deal. You must have seen that Pakistan was very objective and we did not obstruct this deal. You know, we could have gone to procedural delays at the IAEA you know, Pakistan's role was positive. All we are saying is that you should not be discriminatory. India has energy requirements, so do we. Our energy requirements are growing at 7% per annum. Today, our industry, our agriculture is suffering because of power outages. We have hours of load shedding every year. Some Pakistani students are nodding in agreement. And we have to, how can we have growth without energy? So that is an option that can be exercised. And Pakistan should also come under the same safeguards as India. And we are willing to cooperate. And the third component of your question was? Well, China and Pakistan have had a long and a very good understanding and a very close relationship. But our relationship has been more defense-oriented. This government wants to give a twist to that relationship, and we want our relationship to be more economic-oriented. We feel China is an important economic player. It's growing at 10, 11, 12% per annum. They have the technology. They share the border with us. We have, they have the political will to invest in Pakistan. They have undertaken a number of mega projects in Pakistan, which are very valuable for Pakistan. So we are trying to build a new kind of a relationship, which is commercial and trade-oriented. We feel that our trade with China should multiply, and we want the target to reach about $15 billion by 2011. So we are looking at a different window this time.
We have time for one last question. They're up in the top, yes. You.
Thank you, Minister. I'm a student from Afghanistan, here in the US, and I think my question takes a stepping back to the topic we were talking about before, the relation between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so my question is that in the past few years, there have been continuous allegations by the Afghan as well as the international authorities that the government of Pakistan has not only been months ago, Senator Obama actually mentioned that despite the fact that in the past few years, the Pakistani government has received about $10 billion in military aid from the United States, it has not been actually very much, and its strategy should change. So I guess my question is, despite the fact that you mentioned that you are going to take sort of new measures in terms of educating the populace and all that, my question is that, is your government going to take any hard action against the Taliban? Any difference in the policy of the Pakistani government or the Taliban that would have actually short practical resolve on the issue? And the second part of that question, how would you answer actually that question in view of the fact that the People's Party was in power in Pakistan back in 1994 and 95, and allegedly it had very close relations and connections with the initial creation of the Taliban movement in Afghanistan. So I would appreciate it.
My answer to your question is that yes, we have a clear strategy and we are willing to take on the Taliban in a very meaningful manner, because we feel the Taliban are imposing a way of life on Pakistan which is not acceptable to us. It does not fall in the framework and the ideas of the founding fathers of this country. They had conceived Pakistan to be a moderate, democratic, modern Muslim nation, not a orthodoxy or theocracy. So yes, we will take them on. And in order to take them on, we have a strategy in place. If you see, since our government has come into office, look at the operations that are taking place inside Pakistan, in Swat, in Bajor, in Hangu, and many of the agencies bordering Pak-Afghan border. And that activity is a proof of our intention. Secondly, our intent is very clear. I cannot answer for the last government, but this government I can speak for, and that is President Zardari, on his swearing-in ceremony, invites President Karzai over. He was not required. Why did we invite him? We invited him to send a message to you, our Afghan friends and brothers, that we want peace and we want stability in Afghanistan. Because this government feels, and we think, that a stable, peaceful Pakistan is in our interest. It's in our enlightened interest to see a stable, peaceful Afghanistan. And that is why our strategy is going to be different. That is why I have met with Dr. Spanta, your foreign minister, and we've agreed on a roadmap for the next few months. That is why we are holding the Afghan-Pakistan mini jirga on the 27th and 28th of October in Islamabad. That is why I intend to hold the regional economic conference in Islamabad. That is why we are going to send the finance minister of Pakistan over to Kabul for the Joint Economic Commission, so that we develop an understanding and work collectively. Because the blame game will serve us, and neither of us. There's no point in fighting fingers. Afghanistan alone, Pakistan alone cannot do it. Collectively, we can do it, and we shall do it.
Thank you.
1 minute. So I think the minister has seen that we have essentially the United Nations right here at the Woodrow Wilson School. You've been asked questions from multiple perspectives and multiple countries. And we have seen on display the very vibrancy of the new Pakistani democracy. There were times this reminded me of question time in the British Parliament, but you have had a full battery of questions, and you have responded fully, frankly, and energetically, and very convincingly. So we're very grateful to have had you, and we thank you for coming and giving us a a personal view of the new Pakistani government. Thank you.